On today's episode, part 2 of our Spartan US Series preview with OCR stats expert Jack Bauer. Welcome to the OCR Report podcast, brought to you by the OCRReport.com. We are the only podcast to focus exclusively on the elite sport of obstacle course racing, from Spartan to Tough Mudder, to the OCR World Championships, and wherever the elites are racing, we are there. My name is Will Hicks, and this is the OCR Report. Welcome back to the OCR Report podcast, part of the OCR Report network of OCR podcasts. Thank you for listening. My name is Will Hicks. This weekend is the first race in the Spartan US Championship Series, and we are excited. We're going to talk about our coverage in a minute. For the second part of our US Championship Series preview, we are going to talk with our resident stats expert, Jack Bauer, about men and women to watch this weekend in Jacksonville, and then also all year long in the rest of the US Championship Series. If you missed part 1 of our preview, last episode with Ryan Woods and Lindsay Webster, that's okay. You can listen. You're not going to be lost. You don't have to listen in order. It's not Breaking Bad. Before we start, you can email me at willhicks@gmail.com. You can follow the show on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at the OCR Report. Kim DeVos is in charge of our social media, and she crushes it. If you want race results and OCR news, check out the social media of your choice at the OCR Report on all platforms. I say all platforms. We're not on Zanga. All platforms that matter. We're not on Pinterest. Let's talk some news. On Instagram, Spartan announced the dates for the 2019 Spartan Honor Series. Off topic, Spartan announced this on Instagram, but the first place I saw the news posted was on the OCR Discord. Check it out at bit.ly/Discord. Josh Chase does a good job running that show over there. The Honor Series is a series of races held at military venues or near military sites, historical sites, San Antonio, near the Alamo, for example. The Honor Series tends to be overshadowed by the other 3 competitive series Spartan holds, the US Series, the Mountain Series, and the Stadium Series. Some people love the Honor Series, but it doesn't get nearly the attention or the kind of the push, the marketing push that the other 3 series get. The dates for the 2019 Spartan Honor Series are March 23rd, the San Antonio Super, May 11th, the Nationals Park Stadium, June 1st, the Fayetteville Super, July 11th, Fort Carson, Colorado Super, August 24th, the Tri-State New York Sprint, October 19th, Fort Campbell, Tennessee Beast, and the final race in the series is October 26th, the Dallas Beast. That is 7 races in the Spartan Honor Series. Spartan has announced that runners at Honor Series races will receive a special Honor Series medal. They have not announced if the Honor Series is a competitive race series with cumulative points and overall series prizing. We will let you know when we know more. If you would like to follow the race coverage from Jacksonville this weekend, you are covered. On Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, here's what you need to do. On Facebook, go to facebook.com/Spartan. That will be the official live race coverage. You'll find a link to it there. On Instagram, if you prefer Instagram to Facebook, check out at the OCR Report. We'll have a guy on site, Carlo Piscatello, who will be following the race. He will be doing the pre-race. He will be during the race and the post-race stuff. He's done races for us before. He did World's Toughest Mudder last year for World's Toughest Podcast. Just an outstanding job. Very excited to see what Carlo does this weekend. And if you prefer Twitter, You can follow us at the OCR Report. I will be taking over the OCR Report Twitter later this week and tweeting thoughts on the race, results, and general race thoughts. So whether you're a Facebook guy, Instagram guy, Twitter girl, we've got you covered this weekend. This is our first time covering a race like this in a bunch of different ways like this. Let me know what you think. willhicks@gmail.com. We're still figuring it out. That's exciting. It's exciting days. Let's read some iTunes reviews.
5 stars.
5 stars.
5 stars.
5 stars.
5 stars.
5 stars.
5 stars. 5 stars.
Don't forget, if you'd like to be a part of the new 5 stars for this podcast, record yourself saying 5 stars and email it to me, willhicks@gmail.com. Our first review comes from Jeff Schoaf. Jeff writes, "How many stars? Will, I really appreciate what you do. As an enthusiast of the sport and an average OCR athlete just hoping to be near a 40-plus podium, I would rather watch the elites take on a championship race than watch the Super Bowl. I love the elite coverage and am so happy you've started this podcast. Great stuff. 6 stars. We've never had a 6 stars. That's an unofficial 6 stars. iTunes does not recognize it. I recognize it, Jeff. Thank you. 6 stars. Those are kind words, and I appreciate them. Seriously, I am happy. You are happy. And I agree. I would rather watch a good OCR race than a good football game. We just saw the Super Bowl a few weeks ago. There's nothing like a good Super Bowl. And that was nothing like a good Super Bowl. Thank you, Jeff. If you'd like to be a part of the show, like Jeff Schoaf, you can leave a review on Apple Podcasts also. Just open the Purple Podcast app and search for the OCR Report. Click our logo and then scroll down to click Write a Review. And I will read it on a future episode. The show's free, man. I'm not asking much of you. Leave a review. Jack Bauer is the preeminent expert on race results and athlete rankings in the sport of OCR. When I want to get into the weeds and talk numbers behind obstacle course racing, Jack is my first, last, and only phone call. It's time to talk with Jack Bauer. Let's go to the phones. Jack Bauer, welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me, Will. Looking forward to Jacksonville this weekend.
The U.S. Series kicks off in Jacksonville. Let's talk about the venue, and then we'll talk about the athletes. What do we know about the course at Jacksonville?
Well, it's in Florida, so I do not foresee any climbs at all. It's going to be a runner's course. I watched a video on YouTube. I don't know if they're going to do the same exact thing as they did last year. A lot of courses, they're kind of restricted to the areas in which they can go. But it's Florida. It's going to be flat as a pancake. You might have little speed bumps here and there, but it looked pretty muddy. And I was also checking the weather forecast just to see how Jacksonville would be. And it looks like it's going to rain Monday, Tuesday, and Friday, between 30 and 80% chance of rain. And then Saturday is going to be sunny. But the high is going to be in the mid-80s. The low is going to be in the upper 60s. So that's going to be a really hot and 70% humidity. That's going to be some pretty uncomfortable running temperatures, especially because most people aren't going to be used to them at this point in the year, being in winter.
What type of athlete or who do we think that will favor, those conditions will favor, or maybe will hurt more than the others?
Well, if you look at how most of the major races in the U.S. Series have been in the past few years, or just in general, championship races tend to be mountainy, where the runners who are really good at technical trails and who won't break down on the carries, those are the ones who do great on it. But this is going to be a runner's course. You are going to see several low 5-minute miles on the guys' side and sub 6-minute miles on the women's side. I just think it's going to be who's the best runner at this point, because even if they make a super long carry, there's going to be no elevation change on that. And I don't think that many people are failing obstacles these days. So it's going to be a really runner-heavy course.
We are very early in the season. This is only the third race weekend in the U.S. so far. How will that affect the athletes this weekend?
I think there are going to be a lot of unknowns since obviously you had SoCal and Arizona so far. Those are the only real venues that you've seen anybody race so far, in the U.S. at least. And a lot of people are probably using this first race. I'm assuming they've put in great training over the winter, but that first race of the year, you're not always sure where your fitness is, and maybe you haven't practiced your spear as much or crawled under barbed wire as much as usual. So people might be a little bit rusty, but I think that it's still going to be just a crazy fast course, even though everyone's got their eye on the prize later in the season.
Let's talk about the athletes. Let's talk about the women first, actually. Last year, there were 5 main women that contended or that won the U.S. Series races, but one woman really stood out above the rest. Who's the top woman we should watch this year?
Oh, anybody who has followed the sport of OCR for the past few years, Lindsay Webster, without question, is the most dominant athlete, male or female, and that's including John Albin, that's including Hobie Call, Ryan Atkins, everyone through the years. Lindsay has put up the most statistically dominant season of all time last year. She's hands down the woman to beat.
Who else should we watch for the women?
So the big 5 names that everyone knows: Lindsay, Faye, Rhea, Alyssa, and Nicole. Those are, a lot of people just assume those are going to be the top names who'll be there. But if you listen to the first episode that we did on that 2019 season preview for the women, I mentioned a name, Nell Rojas. She is a 2-hour, 31-minute marathoner. That is so stupid fast, it's not even funny. And this the Jacksonville first major race of the year, it's a flat course. I don't think that she's going to struggle with any of the running, and she's already done a couple of races she's not going to be a complete new person to OCR. So I think that she's really going to have a great time in Jacksonville.
You think Nell Rojas is going to surprise some people this weekend?
Well, she beat Nicole the first race of the year, even though Nicole she missed her spear, so she had to do burpees. But that just tells you Nell Rojas just comes in, she hits her spear, which is arguably the most difficult obstacle at this point because Spartan doesn't give challenging rigs, it seems. And I don't think there are too many things that are failable at this point. So you put someone with those kind of wheels on a flat course, she is definitely a podium threat.
You know, when you can run a 5 or 6 minute mile consistently, that covers up a multitude of obstacle sins.
Oh, yeah, without question. And I mean, honestly, at this point, as I mentioned, how many people are failing obstacles these days? I bet if you did a poll of the top 20, 25 finishers, male or female, in every single race, you're really not having much of a failure rate at all. Besides the spear, I think at this point, everyone's so used to Bender that very few people are failing it. And it's not 2014 anymore. People realize the importance of grip strength. So unless there's some crazy rainy elements or freezing cold, I don't think that too many people are going to be failing obstacles. And it mainly comes down to how quick can you transition once you're done with an obstacle, as opposed to how fast can you get through it. It's how fast can you get back to your running speed and just without breaking down from the heavy carries. That's all it comes down to. And if you have someone with the running ability of Nell Rojas and Nicole Miracle for that also, she's arguably been the best pure runner in the sport for the past few years. Those two are going to put on a show.
You know, I want to keep talking about the women, but I want to take a time out. Ryan Atkins made an Instagram post a couple weeks ago talking about obstacle difficulty, and he thinks that elite racers should have a more difficult course than anyone else out there. What do you think about that?
Oh, I've been saying this for years also. He clearly has a much bigger voice in the sport on this. And it's not just me saying it. I think every single person who does the competitive side of Spartan, they realize they're not going to fail many obstacles. It comes down to who has the most grit and who can carry something up a course. That's Spartan racing as opposed to obstacle racing. Most people recognize there's a big difference between what you'd see at OCR Worlds or Savage Race or any of the other different styles versus Spartan. But because the big money's here, that's where a lot of people will go to Spartan. I've had this idea for a couple of years. What I would do, kind of in line with Ryan Atkins, what he made in his post, I would, until let's say the race starts at 7:30, you have a super. Anybody who's legitimate in the elite heat, the probably top 50 or so, they're going to finish in an hour and a half to 2 minutes or so. That puts it at like 9:30. How about that last rig or some of those other obstacles? You just it's very easy to unhook something and then, replace the rings with some nunchucks or something else. Why don't you just have interchangeable sections of the rig until a certain cutoff time? And by then, you're so far out of contention. If you haven't reached it when it's that difficult, you're not going to place well anyway. But that would at least challenge some of the faster runners earlier in the day, and actually mix things up. I thought it was a complete joke that at Tahoe, the last, 2 miles or so, you just ran downhill, you had bender, and then you had a few rings. Like, Ryan Atkins put in an unbelievable chase to gain on John Albin, and obviously Albin has unbelievable obstacle proficiency, but Atkins must have been so devastated just coming down the hill, making up all that ground on Albin just before the finish, and then he knows that Albin's not going to fail any basic rings, and then it was just basically a walk to the finish line after that. It kind of... I don't agree with the direction that they're going, where they're trying to standardize a beast is the hardest one and a sprint has the most basic obstacles. And I understand why they're standardizing it, but I think that you should make some exceptions for the earlier heats in the day. What do you think on that?
You know what? I agree. And you bring up a good point about how the World Championship finished last year with Atkins, just making up time on Albin at the end and then just a couple easy obstacles at the very end. And I wonder if that, I didn't think about it until you mentioned that, but that exact finish is probably what he's been thinking about for the last several months and motivated that post.
But Albin's so good. He's undefeated at OCR Worlds, which not
like Albin's going to fall off, right?
He's not going to fall off. And I think, honestly, Albin is unbelievably underrated despite all of his achievements. No one really talks about him in the U.S. Until it's championship season. Then it's like, oh, he's going to come over and make some big paycheck again. He's so good, but because he doesn't race in the U.S. series because he's not in the U.S., I feel like he kind of gets underrated over here.
Let's go back to the women. We talked about Lindsay Webster. We talked about Nell Rojas and Nicole Miracle. Who are a couple other women we should watch?
Yeah, everybody, Faye, everyone knows that she's always going to put up a strong performance. Over the past couple of years, I feel like 2017 was a little bit of a step back for Faye. But last year, her average finish, she finished slightly better than second place overall in all of her races combined. And that was second to Lindsay Webster in the entire female U.S., just all races in general, not just the U.S. series. So she's clearly a podium threat every time she steps on the course, and Rhea and Alyssa Hawley as well. But I'm going to name another name. I'm going to give a bold prediction. Everyone, okay, I also forgot to mention Rebecca Hammond before I mention this new person. Rebecca Hammond, phenomenal runner. She almost won OCR Worlds in the 3K. She's probably as fast as Nicole as a pure runner at this point, and she's no longer a rookie in OCR. Obviously a podium threat. I'm going to name one more person who everybody should be on the lookout for.
Okay, before we talk about this new name that you want to drop on us, Rebecca Hammond, she kind of came out of nowhere last year. She had two really strong performances at the very end of the year, and she's focusing on OCR a lot more this year.
Yeah, and she proved herself on the international stage going over to the UK and getting second in the 3K, almost winning it just before Nicole ended up winning at the end. But before she had that breakout race in West Virginia, Rebecca Hammond got sixth in Utah. So she was kind of making her presence known. She finished at an hour 30 and Lindsay won just under an hour 21. But she was still about 4 or 5 minutes behind the rest of the pack with Nicole Miracle, Leanne Wastany, Alyssa Hawley, and Kristen Side. They were just ahead of her at Utah. But then, obviously, everyone knows what she did at West Virginia, and she ended up finishing about just under 2.5 minutes behind Lindsay there, and then second place at Tahoe. And so I think that no one's going to be surprised by Rebecca Hammond anymore. She was the dark horse. It was a great story last year, but I think that 2019 is going to have a new dark horse.
Okay, so we had the 5 women from last year. We were adding Nell Rojas and Rebecca Hammond to our top 7 women to watch. Who's this 8th woman we should watch for?
All right. She's from Texas. Her name is Tia Reagan. She is ridiculously fast, just like Nell Rojas. Tia used to be a pro runner. She did 10 miles in 55:30 a few years ago. So she averaged like just over a 5:30 mile for 10 miles in a row. That's stupid fast. And like I mentioned, super flat course, I'm assuming. Tia ended up doing Dallas last year in October, so she's not a complete beginner at OCR. And Yancey's been training her ever since. And she just did a workout the other day where it was 5 by 1,000. Yancey, he programmed it for me. He programmed it for basically everybody. It was 5 by 1,000 and then like roughly a minute and a half rest. And then you just do 5 rounds of that. And Tia averaged 312 or 313 for those repeats. That basically means she's in about 1640 to 1655K shape. I don't think there are too many women that can outrun her, honestly, in OCR. And maybe Nell Rojas probably, but I'm going to assume that Rebecca Hammond and Nicole are right in line with that. So I think that she's going to be able to run with them, and just kind of having all of the competition, and just it's going to be a really good performance by her, I think.
So she's a strong runner, but what's her obstacle game?
Yeah, like I said, last year she ended up doing the Dallas Beast, I believe, and let me look up her stat real quick. So she ended up doing it in about 5 minutes faster than Alexandra Walker, and obviously Alex is one of the better females in the sport. And I just think that Tia's not going to fail anything because she's been training with Yancey, and she's been bouldering with Alex as well. And I just think that her running ability, she's not going to be intimidated by everybody. And I fully think that instead of the big 5 names that we've had, it's going to be the big 8 this year, or the elite 8, I guess.
All right, Tia Reagan, you heard it here first.
Yeah, so I hope I'm not wrong, but I all the numbers are saying that she's going to be a name to watch this year. And I saw on Instagram that she said she's going to be there. So don't be surprised if you see some unknown name up there, or unknown face, and Nell Rojas as well. Before we talk about the men, any last thoughts on the women? What are your predictions? Let's hear your podium.
So Nicole Miracle is the only one of these women, well, Nicole and Nell Rojas, that has run any races so far this year. This is the 3rd race of the U.S. season, the 1st race of the U.S. series. But so Nicole and Nell kind of, I think, have their rust kicked off from the off season. Correct. So I would expect both of them to be on the podium. I don't know Tia Reagan, but if she's great, like as great as you say, she'll probably be up there. But I'm gonna take Tia out because I don't know her. I would say. Go ahead. Oh, I was going to say that just remember Rebecca Hammond, as I mentioned, she got 6th in Utah, and then later in the year she started doing her 2nd. So Tia might not podium this week, but later in the year, definitely watch out for her. I'm going to. I think Nicole will be on the podium. I think Nell Rojas will be on the podium, and I think that 3rd spot will either be. And again, these are not in any order necessarily, but just on the podium. No, you got to do the order. It doesn't matter. Okay. I think it'll either be Lindsay or I want to say Rhea Coble. Rhea has been training. I follow Rhea on Instagram. She's been training like crazy this offseason. Do you think she has the foot speed in a race like this, though? I don't like betting against champions. And Lindsay, no, Rhea's, honestly, her specialty is more in the 24-hour, the endurance stuff. Mm-hmm. But it's hard for me to bet against Lindsay in a race like this. So I would say... I'm going to say Nicole, Lindsay, Nell for my women's podium. Okay. What do you think? It just feels wrong to not put Lindsay on the podium no matter what. And people have to realize that she does not care what happens in February. It's all about later in the year during the major races. So I don't know how great her fitness is at the moment, but it doesn't matter. She's going to come around no matter what. Even if she's dominated now, she's only going to get better as the year goes on. But I would go with those same 3 women for my podium. I think that Nicole, do the runner's course, I would put her on it. And now that I'm saying this out loud, it's like, how do I not put Rebecca Hammond on there for a runner's course? This is killing me. I guess I would. Someone's got to win. I'm going to go Nicole first, Nell Rojas second, and then Lindsay third, followed by Rebecca and Tia. That's my top 5 prediction. But we don't have a lot of data going out there at this point. Like you mentioned, we've only seen Nell and Nicole race at this point, so we'll learn a lot this weekend. But I'm excited. I think it's going to be the Elite 8 this year.
I'm pumped.
What do you think for the series? Do you think Lindsay's won the women's series every year they've had it?
Yeah, Lindsay is basically guaranteed a spot on the podium. We've already discussed the flaws in the new point scoring system. So if you win like 2 or 3 events, and she very easily can do that, it only matters if you're top 5 for the big point differential. And then once you're 6th and lower, you only lose 1 point per position as opposed to 24 to 36 for those other ones. So Lindsay's guaranteed to get in the top 3 almost every single race that she's ever done. So I fully believe that she's going to end up getting ending up as the U.S. champion again this year.
Let's talk about the men. Last year, Ryan Woods won the men's championship. How do you see his chances this year?
Ryan Woods is fit right now. He just did a trail run 8K, which is just under 5 miles, in 25:30 the other week. I think last weekend. That he is definitely the fastest runner in the field right now. But I think Mark Batres is also just behind him. But those would be my 2 favorites for a course like this. Doesn't mean that's how I think the entire U.S. series is going to go, but early in the year, in a very runner-friendly course, I think that those 2 are the 2 to beat on the men's side.
So Ryan Woods and Mark Batres. Last year, there were 2 other men that were contending with Woods for the series title. What do you think about Atkins and Killian this year?
Yeah, I think that it's been very consistent over the past few years on the men's side. We just talked about how there are going to be a couple new names on the women's side this year. Woods, Atkins, Killian, and I'd say Moat have differentiated them. They're just on like a slightly higher level than Kent, VJ, and Batres. I think that Batres is going to move up this year. Kent also, but he just released his schedule, and it looks like he's going to be focusing on a lot of the shorter races, but when he's not doing a U.S. championship race. And he's also heading over to Europe to their European Championship, which would be really cool to see how different countries and nationalities stack up against when some of the best U.S. racers go over there. Because I know that Alyssa, I think she got 4th last year when she went over there, and Johnny Luna Lima, who's from the U.S. but living in Europe at the time, he ended up getting 3rd last year. So there are some really talented Europeans out there. But I think that Woods, Atkins, Killian, and Moat have been on a different level over the past couple of years than the other guys that I just mentioned.
The deal with Cody Moat, he doesn't always race the U.S. series. He kind of shows up near the end, and he's always a factor when he shows up, but he doesn't race enough races usually to contend for the series title.
Yeah, and I don't think that he has a problem with that. He only did 2 races when he won the World Championship in 2017, and he has so many other commitments outside OCR where he'll just train in the morning, and then he's a teacher, and then he coaches track and wrestling and cross country, and obviously has a family. So I don't think that leaving to do these races over the course of the year is just, I don't think it's going to fit in his schedule. So I don't think that he'll end up being at a lot of these races. But one other thing that I'm curious on, speaking of Cody Moat, Tahoe this year, they said they're going to have Sunday as only the elite race, right? Or the World Championship, and also age group.
Spartan's kind of advertised this, that the World Championship will be reserved for Sunday, so that the course, they say you have the course to yourself. Now, for religious reasons, Cody Moat does not race on Sundays. He's a 2-time champion.
Exactly. I was just about to bring up that since he's Mormon, and I know this has been an issue in the past, it was either him or Hobie 5 years or so ago. The Spartan had plans on making their biggest races on Sunday, and either Cody or Hobie, who were the only world champions to that point, were both, one of them was like, I'm not going to compete in Spartan anymore if you decide to do this, because I won't race on Sunday for religious reasons. I don't think that we're going to see Cody Moat this year. If that's the case, they've already slotted in the date. They can't just, people have already made travel arrangements and stuff like for the Saturday race. If they're just an open heater, or they're not going to race in the championship, I don't think that they're going to be able to go back and switch that up at this point. But if it stays on Sunday, I don't think that we'll be seeing Cody Moat at Tahoe this year, which would be a terrible shame, honestly.
Yeah, he's kind of like Albin. Like, he shows up and he can win it just by showing up. But you won't see him every week. I think you're right.
Yeah, absolutely. Easily one of the top 3 or 4 greatest of all time.
So we've talked about Atkins, Woods, Batres, Ryan Kent, Robert Killian, Cody Moat. What do you think about VJ Jones?
So if I heard it correctly, he was on Benny Gifford on the Obstacle Dominator. He was on a podcast with him, and he mentioned that he will actually not be in Florida. I don't know if he's changed his mind since then, or when Benny actually recorded that episode. But VJ said that he's making his debut in Alabama. I think that's March 16th. And honestly, that's kind of surprising because this course, VJ has just been tearing up the first 4 races of the year. He's won all of them. In SoCal and Arizona, but this is a fast course. It's and VJ is one of the fastest runners in the sport. Last year, VJ, his 2 best finishes in the U.S. National Series were Seattle, which was flat, and Chicago, where he got second, which was flat also. So you'd think that if there's any course that he'd do well in, this is the one to do it at. But it seems like he already made it known that he will not be at Jacksonville this upcoming weekend. So I don't know. I think he would have done really well, and he's already, the rust is already gone with him because he's run 4 races this year. So would have been nice seeing him, but I don't believe he'll be there.
I've never won a Spartan race, and I never will.
Neither have I. Well, I might, but
you have your odds are better than mine.
I have a few podiums, but not a win yet.
I have never won 4 races in a row like VJ has. If it was me, and if I had won every single race that's been held this year, I'd roll. I'd let it ride. Like, let's see how long we can take this.
Yeah, and he's won $2,000. I mean, obviously you can't just spend it all, but I'm sure that he could have found some cheap Spirit Airlines midnight connection through 7 cities type of flight to get to Jacksonville for this race. But I understand at the same time that it's a long season, and he already mentioned that he's focusing on the August for his main peak, and he realizes that just he's so young and he just doesn't have that aerobic base yet that he doesn't expect to win a race like Tahoe yet. So he's kind of focusing more on the NORAM Championship in Vermont earlier this summer, peaking around then in West Virginia as well. But I totally agree with you. Just if you're this hot at the moment, you might as well keep it going if it's possible.
Another big name to watch is Ryan Kempson. Tell me about Kempson.
Yeah, so I have talked to a few people, and I won't name names, but they've mentioned that out of all the people in the sport that they think have the most potential or untapped potential at this point, it's Ryan Kempson. He had some phenomenal performances last year, stadium races. He had a top 10 at West Virginia, and I think that he just proved that he belonged among those that 1B group, like just behind them. And he was a former college basketball player, and strangely enough, he actually was roommates with several guys that I went to high school with in New Hampshire. Like, crazy how that ended up working out in college. But so he hasn't had that crazy long running background that most of the other top names that you see. So he's a couple years into, he's been around for 5+ years in OCR, but in terms of actual formal running training, he hasn't just had as much time as the rest of them. So I think that Ryan Kempson has the most potential at this point to keep going forward out of the names who haven't been in that top Woods, Killian, Atkins group at the moment.
There's a guy who pops in and out once in a while. You won't see him for a while, then he'll jump in and win a race. John Yatsko.
Yeah, no one knows anything about him because he doesn't have like a cell phone or social media. So
wait, hang on. He doesn't have a cell phone?
Dead serious, yeah. Like I don't know if that's true anymore, but there was a time when he like lived in Alaska and then rode his bike like down here. It was some crazy story. Rose Wetzel's husband like gets in contact with him every once in a while, but I know that Yatsko is a very mysterious man, but he always does well when he races.
You know what? We've mentioned a lot of guys. We've barely talked about Ryan Atkins at all. He's one of the most dominant men in the history of the sport.
Yeah, what's he ever done?
What do you think? And he's a past U.S. Series champion also. What do you think about Atkins versus Woods this year?
So if we're looking specifically at Jacksonville, Atkins just posted on Instagram that he did a 10K local road race, and he did it in 34:30. That's not even close to where Woods is at running-wise. And Atkins, he just kind of makes it through these courses, and he gains on everybody because he's just so strong, and just his engine never stops. He's not necessarily the fastest runner, But in terms of like technical terrain and like he's one of the best descenders in the world, and he's unbelievable at carries, very obstacle proficient. But I think on a course like this early in the year, and you saw how he's been biking across Canada as well. I don't think that he's in prime shape at the moment, but he's one of the most consistent racers in the world in history. So I wouldn't be surprised to see him fighting for a podium spot as well. But he doesn't really care about February. It's all about the August and September range for him.
He's very smart about his racing and his training. His training looks like it's not methodical, but he's told me before, he's like, I know what I'm doing. Like, I look like I'm just, gallivanting across Canada, but I'm training. I know what's going on.
Yeah, he's averaging 250, 300 watts like while he's biking, I'm sure, as opposed to just pedaling on a Huffy bike down the street. Like he's got a purpose while he's doing all this, and obviously climbing and stuff. But I also think it's really smart. He's not getting burned out by just solely racing or solely focusing on running. He's an athlete. Like, he's doing everything. And I think that that's very important in terms of just doing well at this sport, just being well-rounded, because athleticism takes you a long way as well. Because once you get to a certain point, it's really difficult to improve as a runner. But if you're not burned out, like, I don't know, the results speak for themselves, and clearly his method works. And it just seems like instead of just doing tempo runs and long runs and everything that everyone else is doing, he just has so much diversity in his training, and he's never not done well. So keep doing what you're doing, Ryan.
So if you had to make a prediction for the men this weekend, who do you think is going to win Jacksonville?
Woods, no doubt. Just his running at the moment, and 2018 he showed that obstacles are no longer a weakness. I think that Ryan Woods, based on what current fitness he's in, he is the man to beat. And then I would go second place Mark Batres, and third, it's going to be really difficult leaving Atkins off the podium, but I'm going to go with Robert Killian.
Really? Atkins in fourth?
I don't think his running's there, and because there's not a lot of technical terrain and it's a flat course, just based on his 10K that he just ran, I don't think that Atkins is going to end up podiuming him at this. But it doesn't matter, because like I said, it's February 23rd when this race is going to be held. This isn't what he's trying to peak for. So I think that obviously the rest of the season Atkins is going to bring his A game, and he's not just showing up. He's still going to try to win this. But I think that Woods and Batres at this point, they're just going to be too strong of a runner to really reel in for Atkins at the moment.
You kind of mentioned the kind of tiers of the men. It's a lot more clear with the men as opposed to the women. Like, it's got Woods, Killian, Atkins.
Yeah, it's almost boring because there aren't 8 names fighting for the win every time, right? On the women's side?
On the women's side, honestly, any one of those 8 women could win, I think, right? Even like...
depending on the course layout, absolutely. Like, Alyssa Hawley might win in a course with a ton of carries, and then if there's just a crazy runner's course, it's just like what we described for Jacksonville for our predictions here, and Lindsay's always going to be on the podium. So, yeah, the women's field is just so much more variety in general.
But for the men, it seems like whether it's a flat course, whether it's a mountainous course, it's always one of those 3 guys, Killian's, Atkins, and Woods. Do you think Batres is kind of making that leap into the 1A category?
I do. I think that he's kind of going to follow the same path that Ryan Woods did, where he relied on his running strength too much. But I went to the Spartan Combine this past year in November, and Mark Batres was an animal on both of the heavy carry. Like, they had us do literally over a mile of a bucket carry, and then right after that, like, we had like a 20-minute break. We had like 3/4 of a mile of a double sandbag with a bunch of other. It was just brutal. And Mark he was, besides Austin Azar and a couple other guys, he was like the 3rd or 4th best heavy carrier in the entire competition. Just unbelievable. I was very impressed at how well he was doing with that, and I don't think that he's going to miss obstacles at this point. And obviously he's a phenomenal runner, and I think that Mark Batres 2019 is going to be like Ryan Woods 2018, where he just steps up into that next echelon. Kind of a breakthrough year for Mark Batres. Yep. Any last thoughts on the men before we talk about some other stuff? I would say, since we've only seen VJ rate, and Ryan Kent also ran earlier this year. I think in SoCal, he didn't have a great race, but who cares? Same thing. It doesn't mean that his whole season is going to be a bust. I don't think that there's too much that we can go by. We see a couple of trail or cross country races that guys are doing on the side as a time trial, but there's a whole lot of season to go. And I don't think that people should put too much stock into what happens in Jacksonville and making predictions on how Tahoe or the rest of the series is going to go just by this one race, since it's so different than Big Bear or Utah or any of these other hilly courses that are going to happen later in the year. So I think that we'll see some surprise results here, but that doesn't mean that that's how the rest of the season is going to shape up. For the U.S. series, right now we obviously have a lot of supers and beasts, but if we go back to that stadium point, if you add in a stadium, like make it the first race of the year, and then the second race of the year is a mountain super, that gives people the opportunity, and make both of them overlapping with the U.S. series. That gives people the opportunity to pick and choose. Like, hey, I've already qualified for the stadium series, or it's now that I can't drop one, I've at least mandatory done the first race in both series, and now I can kind of branch off. Like, I'm still going to do the U.S. series. Now I have 2 of those done. You can at least have a little bit of overlap at that point.
Yeah, and you know what? I kind of like the idea of having the stadium and then the mountain like right after, like, because just certain athletes will perform well at the stadium and certain athletes will perform well in the mountain. And then so then the points, it's not like anyone's going to build up a big lead in the point series, right? Like,
yeah, and I'm sure they'll make adjustments next year, because I just see this being a very, very big talking point. Like, a lot of people someone who gets 6th is going to be pissed that they only lose 1 point versus 5th place. So or the 5th place person might be mad about that because there's no big gap in how many points they earn. But yeah, I'm on board with that completely. Like, you kind of, you cater to both. Like, all right, that's what it is. Like, U.S. National Series, which half of them are mountain courses, to be honest, and then the Mountain Series, obviously all mountains and all stadiums. But you can kind of give some diversity, and then just like give a random sprint. Like, who cares if it's in? I don't even know, like a random, like even SoCal. They've got some rolling hills there that would make a really good course, pretty accessible in terms of like major airports nearby. I don't know. I just think it would be cool to see them switch it up next year.
I think a sprint would be good. If you're going to do a sprint, it'd be good on a flat course like Jacksonville. Like, let the runners run. Like, let the horses go.
Yeah, and actually a course like Jacksonville might be over in 35 minutes or so, instead of like, I'm predicting this weekend might be under an hour for the men. Like, that for a super,
right?
That's so fast. But what's going to slow them down? Unless they have like a mile-long bucket carry, people are just going to get up and go, and they're going to be flying. So I don't know how many off the top of my head supers have been run under an hour. Maybe a couple through the history of Spartan.
Sure.
And they're probably on the shorter end. But if there's any week that this might happen at, it's this one.
Jack, we've been talking about the U.S. races, but there was actually an international race this past weekend that was pretty interesting.
Yes, so they had the Middle East and Africa Spartan Championship, kind of like what West Virginia will end up being for the U.S. in August. Only this was in February on a Friday, so kind of strange timing, but they had some really, really strong performances over there. And I know that I've mentioned several times that a lot of the international names are not well known in the U.S. because we don't see them time after time at these major races. And the only time that people really come over is for Tahoe. Although Nicolaj Dam and Leon Kofod, they came over for a couple of the races so far, and they podiumed or were very close to podium in those as well, just showing that there are a lot of talent internationally. But at the Middle East and North Africa Championship, a guy named Mohamed Mira, he ended up winning. It was an hour and 56 for his time, and he beat second place by about just over 4 minutes. Mohamed Mira is a ridiculous runner. His 10K PR from December, so a couple months ago, he ran a 29:47 for 10K. That's back-to-back sub 14:45s, which is just stupid fast. I think I don't know how difficult Middle East courses are compared to the U.S. in terms of like technical and carries and stuff. I've talked to a couple of races over there. Halvor Borsheim, he told me that there's a lot of cheating over there, and the weights are not standardized. But I have a feeling that like the top names, they're still following the rules. But later in the races, apparently there's a big issue with inconsistent judging and stuff. But Mohamed, he ended up beating Sergey Paraligan, the guy who got third at OCR World's 15K this past year in the UK. by 5 minutes. So, and Sergey also won the European Spartan Championship last year, beating everybody in Europe. So for this guy to beat him by 5 minutes, watch out for Mohamed Mira. The Middle East, I know that a lot of people, Sergey and Igor Belisov, he got second place, also from Russia. A lot of people who head over there. Fourth place was Armin Botha. He's from South Africa. He's one of the only guys who can beat Thomas Van Tonder, who's from South Africa and got fifth at OCR Worlds basically every time he's done it, top 5 or top 10. Totally super legit runner and OCR athlete. And then fifth place was Gregoire Rozonigo. He's either from France or Switzerland, but he's one of the top European racers. So there aren't. So it seems like a lot of people travel over to the Middle East from different countries to race this Middle East Championship. But Mohamed Mira ended up beating all those top racers by 4+ minutes. So I would totally be on watch for this guy. He's going to have a great season if this result predicts the rest of the year.
Do you think that Mohamed Mira, do you think we might see him in Tahoe this year?
Well, the guy that I mentioned who got third place, Sergey Paraligin, he's from Russia, and he wanted to go to Tahoe last year after winning the European Championship, but he had a visa issue, and he's tried it for 4 straight years to come over to Tahoe, but he hasn't been able to race, which is a shame because he's clearly one of the best athletes in the entire sport, whether it's at OCR World or on the Spartan circuit. So I'm assuming that Mohamed, if he's doing this well, he realizes that, hey, maybe I can make some serious money at Tahoe. I don't know if he'll end up racing. It's too early to know, but I'm definitely going to reach out to the guy. I want to know more about him because he has a profile on IAAF, which is the international, basically the track and field governing body. And that means he's a former pro runner, basically. And anyone who runs sub 30 for a 10K and gets obstacle proficient, watch out for that. He could be a force to be reckoned with if he ends up stepping into some bigger races. But I don't think we'll see a guy like him or any of the other names in the U.S. circuit because it's just too expensive to travel internationally for just some of these relatively smaller races versus Tahoe. But I think it would be exciting to see him against some bigger competition. But the guy's legit.
Jack, one of the Spartan women's world champions, she won back-to-back coming from Europe also. So it's interesting to watch these international athletes.
Yeah, and John Albin as well, like from the UK and Norway. Like it is no longer simply a U.S. sport. It's for a few years you've had some phenomenal guys and women as well. Albert Soler from Spain, he's one of the top racers in the world. Matt Murphy has podiumed. He's kind of been on and off the scene, but basically whenever he runs, he's a guaranteed podium in against any competition. He raced a lot in 2017, but kind of disappeared in 2018. So I'd like to see him again if he has time, but I'm not sure what his commitments are. But yeah, OCR is an international sport at this point. The top names and the days of just showing up to a race and just hoping that no one good lives in that area are done. Like a podium is no longer a guarantee, no matter how good you are, unless you're Atkins or Woods on that level. But the sport is so deep at this point.
Jack, you have a lot of access to data and race results. How can people follow along if they want to know more about their the elite athletes or the race results?
Yeah, so I mentioned I'm working with Yancey Culp. If you go to yancycamp.com, and then there's a banner that says rankings, and we have some of or basically every major race that's happened, we have the top 10 results over time. So if you want to know who got 9th place at the 2013 Killington Beast World Championship, like you can just filter through that and find it. It's kind of like your one-stop shop for the major races. And also we're having a 0 to 100 ranking for everybody. So our coder, he's been in Ireland and just had some other work commitments, but he messaged me earlier today and said that this week before Jacksonville, without question, the entire website will be updated and have the new layout that he's been working on and new visual appeal for it. So the whole website's going to be different versus what everyone's been seeing in the past. So it's kind of frustrating that it's taken this long between me breaking my hand and him having work commitments once my hand wasn't broken. And so it's just been really difficult to get everything done. But before Jacksonville, the whole website's going to be a lot different, and we'll have broken down by region and worldwide. Everyone will have their ranking, the strength of schedule, which takes into account how difficult the the races were. I'm going to assume that Jacksonville is going to be the hardest race up until this point, but as the season goes on, its relative difficulty will kind of take a step back, and that'll be reflected. So we've got some cool things coming. So appreciate everyone being patient. I've had a lot of people reach out and be like, hey, where's the update? I want to know what's going on. But I know I've said it several times, but for real, it'll be done before Jacksonville, and then having the weekly or so updates after that.
Give me that website one more time.
YanceyCamp.com, and then there's a banner that says rankings on the top.
Jack, do you have anything else you want to plug? Any sponsors? What's going on in the Bauer household?
The Bauer household, not too much. Just trying to recover from my broken hand that I had, and hopefully I'll be at Citi Field. Although I don't know who's going to be there since it has the same date as Seattle, so that'll be an interesting weekend.
You know what? We didn't talk about that. Let's talk about that. There are some conflicts between the three major Spartan race series this year.
Yeah, it's really unfortunate because they had their new policy. Every race counts. You can't drop or not show up to a race and just eliminate your worst score and then just show up to the rest of them in the series. This year, you don't show up, you get 0 points, and that's going to like someone who places 30th but attends all the races could, in theory, beat somebody who gets first place at several races and then just misses one because they had a wedding to go to or were hurt or something. I think it's a really, really difficult decision for a lot of people because you have people. Robert Killian won the Stadium Series in the past. I'm sure he wants to do a Stadium Series again this year, but now he's, I'm sure, contractually obligated to go to Seattle the same weekend. No way you can race in New York and Seattle on the same day. Never mind perform well if you did anyway. So I think that he's gonna be in Seattle as well. Ryan Kent, he's always done well in the Stadium Series. Ryan Kempston, Stadium Series versus the U.S. Series. It's going to be a really tough decision, and I'm sure that several women. I heard Cassidy Watton's not racing anything this year, so that opens up the Stadium Series a little bit as well. But you have names like Kelly Sullivan, who, what's she going to do? Is she going to end up trying to place well in the Stadium Series again, or is she going to do the U.S. Series? Orla's going to do well or focus on that, I'm sure, because she's a short course specialist. But I think that it's going to really make some difficult decisions for people, and I'm just not a fan that people have to make that, especially the first race of the year. Like, they announced this 2 weeks ago, would you say, the dates? That's beginning of February, and the first race is in April. But you have another U.S. Series race in February as well. It's like if you've already booked your flight to go to Jacksonville and compete, you're probably going to want to commit to Jacksonville and then Alabama as well because you've already spent the money to do that before the first stadium arrives. I just think it was poor planning on them, and they could have been like, you know what, we're just going to scrap Citi Field. Let's do Los Angeles in August instead. They had so many options, but it's kind of a bummer.
Yeah, the big one you're talking about is on April 13th. The third race in the U.S. Series is in Seattle, and the first race in the Stadium Series is in New York, Citi Field.
Exactly. Yep. And I think that it's just going to have you're going to see a lot of angry comments, and it as well. It'll probably affect some of the people doing the age group rankings as well this year because that's a much more competitive division than it was a couple of years ago, and people are going to have to make. Everyone talks about Ryan Kent and Robert Killian and the bigger names, but everybody's going to have to decide if they want to place well in a series, which one they're going to go with. So it's going to be a really interesting to see April 14th what the comments are the day after the events.
They'll probably be talking about it April 12th also.
Yeah, absolutely. But and I've got a question for you, just in terms of the overall scheduling of just how Spartan races with their major championship races. So I've had this idea for a while as well, kind of like how I had the obstacles switch it out once it's later in the day from the harder stuff to the easy stuff later in the day, but at least challenge the elite athletes early on. Okay. How about for the U.S. Series, you have one of every discipline. You have a sprint, you have a super, a beast, a stadium. I don't think ultra beast because that's just a completely different training style than everything else. But why not include a stadium race in the U.S. Series? And they could have easily done that for Citi Field if they were considering that. And that way you get to see how would Ryan Woods do at a stadium. I'm sure he'd do ridiculously well because he's such a good runner, and he's obviously done well in basically everything else. But I think that it would be really interesting to add that format as opposed to just like, all right, sprint super. I don't even think they have sprints, but it's just super beast, and then a beast championship. I think if you're really trying to find the best overall athlete, why not add a stadium race to the series? So I hope they do something like that in 2020.
I love the idea, but I think you mentioned like no Ultra Beast. I think if you add a stadium, you have to also add an Ultra Beast because the sprint.
How's the stadium different than a sprint though? In terms of the duration,
the sprint, the super, and the beast are all kind of like variations on a theme. Like one's 5 miles, one's 8 miles, one's 13 miles. They're all they're the same type of race, just different distances generally, right? The stadium or it's really tough for me to say.
Yeah.
I know, right?
I can't do it.
But a stadium race in a stadium, it's running up stairs. It's doing those like a plank on those boards with wheels kind of thing. It's different exercises. It's different a different intensity. Yes, it's like maybe a sprint distance, like a short sprint, but it's totally different. You're like doing squats. Do 20 like you're doing exercises you wouldn't do in a regular sprint out on a mountain somewhere.
But that's the thing. That's a regular race. Like, why does it need to be so standardized?
No. I love the idea, but I think if you have if you add the stadium race to the sprint super beast series, then you also should add an ultra beast because it's another different animal totally. It's not so much about the obstacle. It is, but it's about the 26 miles plus whatever the distance is.
Yeah, but then it's 2 days recovery after a stadium race versus 2 weeks before you're starting to feel great after an Ultra Beast again. I just think that it's such a different energy demand, and they don't even have sprints for the US series. Like, I would just love for them to have one of those. Just to pick any venue. I know they had Breckenridge a couple of years ago where Hobie won in like just under 50 minutes, but that's like arguably, and they had Montana one other time, but like 45 to 50 minutes is about the shortest major championship race that they've ever had. And I don't know. I know it's a completely different topic, and I don't want to get sidetracked with it, but it would be really interesting to add a stadium next year because it seems like a lot of people, like Forrest Bogue, he ended up posting on Instagram that he's going to do some stadium races this year. Ryan Kent obviously has done the same, and a lot of guys just have. It seems like they've really taken an interest into diversifying because all an Ultra Beast is really 2 laps of the beast, and then how well did you fuel, and did you go out too hard too early? Like I'm sure it is a crazy. I've never run one, but I'm sure it's a ridiculous effort. But I feel like you at least won't compromise your whole season and have to train differently if you were to add a stadium race for instance in that. But yeah, that's just my 2 cents.
And then thinking out loud, if you add the Ultra Beast, there's someone yelling at their phone right now, what about a hurricane heat? What about a hurricane heat? And that's just a terrible idea.
And then it's like what point does the duration end up like making it? Is 6 hours versus 12 hours like, or 24 hour, like at what point is too long? Like then it becomes like, all right, are you focusing on the long stuff versus the short stuff? Like I don't know. This could be a completely different topic for a different time. It just popped into my head, so I wanted to at least get your opinion on it.
And someone else is yelling at their phone, what about the Spartan SGX training program?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I don't think that'll ever make it to the US Championship Series. But
Jack, any last thoughts on the 2019 Spartan US Series?
Yeah, like I said, at this point, we don't have a whole lot to go by because this is easily the earliest in the year that they've had a major race. So we've only really seen what VJ and what he's done this year on the guy's side, but he isn't racing. And then the couple guys from Denmark, they're not going to be here as well. So like the top names that you've seen on the men's side haven't really raced. But on the women's side, you've seen Nicole and you've seen Nell Rojas so far, but you haven't seen what kind of shape Lindsay's in. And obviously Ray is training hard, but we don't know if she's rusty or not. So there's a lot that we're going to learn this weekend. I think at this point, everybody has had a very strong off season, but most of their focus is on later in the season when the races really, really matter. But I don't know. I wouldn't put too much stock into how the results go because this is a course completely different than what the rest of the year is going to be like since it's so flat.
So we're going to watch the race this weekend. We'll come back next week and talk about it.
Are you gonna be waking up at 4 a.m. on Saturday morning to watch it live?
You know what? My plan is to live tweet it. But But I'm going to be.
You're actually doing it? Really?
I'm going to be on a ski thing with my family, so I'm going to have to like wake up and like sneak downstairs and watch it on my laptop while I'm tweeting.
Yeah, I will watch the replay because I'm not getting up that early.
So we'll talk about it next week.
Yep.
Jack.
Give a recap.
Jack, I will talk to you soon.
All right. Thanks, Will.
Special thanks to Jack Bauer. Well done, Jack. We are going to have Jack back next week after the race to recap it and talk about the results and what those results mean for the rest of the year. What do you think about our 2-part US Championship Series preview? Let me know in a review on Apple Podcasts. I will talk with you soon. Go spend time with someone you love.